A calm, terrifyingly quiet voice cut through the morning air of the coffee shop. "You want my ID? You better be absolutely sure you want to go down this road, officer, because once I take this out, your career is over." Those words came from a man in a bespoke suit, standing in a trendy cafe in an affluent suburb, surrounded by stunned patrons. The police officer in front of him, Officer Bryce Caldwell, smirked with his hand resting on his taser. He thought he was intimidating a suspect. He thought he was cleaning up the streets. He had no idea he was about to handcuff the assistant special agent in charge of the FBI's Civil Rights Division. What started as a simple morning coffee run became a national scandal that exposed a city's dark corruption, destroyed a police department's reputation, and cost taxpayers $5.6 million. This isn't just a story about karma. It's a story about what happens when arrogance meets absolute power. In the wealthy suburb of Oak Haven, just outside Chicago, the morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen maple leaves and expensive espresso. This was the kind of town where lawns were manicured with surgical precision, cars were exclusively German or electric, and the police force prided itself on keeping the riffraff out. Special Agent Kendrick Hale adjusted the cuffs of his charcoal Armani suit as he stepped out of his black government-issue SUV. Kendrick wasn't from Oak Haven. He was a man who had grown up in the rougher parts of Southside Chicago, clawed his way through law school, and spent 20 years climbing the ladder of federal law enforcement. Now, at 48, he was a legend in the Bureau. He had taken down human trafficking rings in D.C. and rooted out corruption in New Orleans. Today, however, he wasn't hunting criminals. He was hunting caffeine. He was also early for a high-level meeting with District Attorney Vanessa Rhodes. They were scheduled to discuss a joint task force on organized crime, and Vanessa had suggested the Bean and Leaf, a trendy high-end coffee spot on Main Street known for its exclusive atmosphere. Kendrick checked his watch, a vintage Omega, a gift from his wife after his promotion. He had time. He pushed open the glass door of the coffee shop. The bell chimed softly. The interior was an explosion of rustic chic, reclaimed wood, Edison bulbs, and the low hum of indie folk music. The clientele was exactly what you'd expect: women in yoga pants holding tiny dogs, men in Patagonia vests typing furiously on MacBooks. When Kendrick walked in, the hum of conversation didn't stop, but it stuttered. He was a tall, broad-shouldered black man in a suit that cost more than most people's cars. He walked with a natural authority, head high, eyes scanning the room out of habit, not malice. But in Oak Haven, authority that didn't wear a badge made people nervous. He approached the counter. The barista, a young college student named Jessica, looked up. She blinked, her smile faltering for a fraction of a second. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice slightly higher than it had been for the customer before him. "Good morning," Kendrick said, his voice a deep, smooth baritone. He smiled warmly, trying to disarm the tension he was used to sensing. "I'll have a black coffee, dark roast, and a blueberry scone, please." "For here or to go?" Jessica glanced past him toward the window. "For here. I'm meeting a colleague." "Okay, that'll be $12.50. Kendrick tapped his card. He moved to the pickup counter and waited. He pulled out his phone to check his emails. A message from his deputy director. "The indictment is sealed. We move on the cartel at noon." Kendrick allowed himself a small, satisfied smirk. It was going to be a good day. He took his coffee and the scone, scanning the room for a seat. He chose a small table near the window, wanting to keep an eye on the street for Vanessa's arrival. He sat down, crossed his legs, and took a sip of the steaming coffee. Outside, a patrol car rolled slowly down Main Street. It was a black and white Dodge Charger with the words "To Protect and Serve" emblazoned on the side. Behind the wheel was Officer Bryce Caldwell. Caldwell was a 10-year veteran of the force. He was the kind of cop who had peaked in high school, football captain, bully, loud. He had a thick neck, a buzz cut starting to gray, and a personnel file filled with excessive force complaints that had all been conveniently swept under the rug by the police union. Caldwell was bored. Oak Haven was quiet, too quiet. He was itching for something to happen, something that would let him flex the authority he felt he was owed. As he cruised past the Bean and Leaf, his eyes darted to the window. He saw the patrons, the regulars, and then he saw Kendrick. To Caldwell, Kendrick didn't look like a federal agent preparing for a multi-state takedown. To Caldwell's prejudiced eyes, Kendrick looked like an anomaly, a black man in a suit, sitting alone, watching the street. He's casing the place, Caldwell thought, or he's waiting for a drop. Caldwell pulled the cruiser over, tires crunching against the curb. He didn't call it in. He didn't run the plate of the black SUV parked nearby. He just put the car in park, adjusted his utility belt, and stepped out. Inside the shop, the atmosphere shifted instantly. The moment the heavy door opened and the uniformed officer stepped in, the chatter died down. People looked from the cop to the man in the window. Kendrick Hale didn't look up. He was reading a briefing on his phone, but his training kicked in. He registered the heavy footsteps, the jingle of keys and equipment, the silence of the room. He knew exactly who had entered. Ignore him, Kendrick told himself. Just a local cop doing his rounds. But the footsteps didn't head to the counter. They headed straight for him. Officer Bryce Caldwell stopped at Kendrick's table. He stood there for a long, uncomfortable silence, his shadow falling over Kendrick's phone screen. Kendrick took a slow breath. He swiped his phone screen off, placed it face down on the table, and looked up. He kept his expression neutral, the bureau face. "Can I help you, officer?" Kendrick asked politely. Caldwell didn't smile. He hooked his thumbs into his vest, looming over the seated man. "You live around here?" Kendrick picked up his coffee cup. "Is there a problem?" "I asked you a question," Caldwell said, his voice loud enough for the tables nearby to hear. "Do you live in this neighborhood?" "I don't see how that's relevant," Kendrick said calmly. "I'm a paying customer having a coffee." "We've had some complaints," Caldwell lied. It was a standard tactic. Manufacture a complaint to justify an ID check. Reports of suspicious activity. Men matching your description, loitering in businesses. Kendrick almost laughed. Matching my description? A man in a three-piece suit eating a scone? A woman at a nearby table stifled a nervous giggle. Caldwell's face turned a shade of red. He didn't like being mocked. "Stand up," Caldwell commanded. Kendrick didn't move. He leaned back in his chair, interlocking his fingers. "Officer, I am waiting for a meeting. I haven't committed any crime. I haven't broken any laws. Unless you can articulate a reasonable suspicion that I am involved in criminal activity, I'm going to finish my coffee." This was the moment, the fork in the road. A smarter cop would have walked away. A smarter cop would have realized that men who speak with that level of calm, legal precision usually have the power to back it up. But Bryce Caldwell wasn't a smart cop. He was a bully who had been challenged in front of an audience. "I said stand up," Caldwell barked, his hand dropping to the baton on his belt. "I want to see some ID now." Kendrick sighed. It was a sigh of deep exhaustion. He looked at the officer with eyes that had seen cartel bosses and serial killers, eyes that held zero fear of a suburban patrolman. "Officer," Kendrick said, his voice dropping an octave, deadly serious. "You are making a mistake, a very expensive mistake. I suggest you walk away." Caldwell grabbed Kendrick's arm. The moment Caldwell's hand touched the expensive fabric of Kendrick's suit jacket, the dynamic in the room shattered. "Get your hands off me," Kendrick said. He didn't shout. He didn't flinch. He simply stated it as a fact. "You're resisting," Caldwell yelled, playing to the imaginary camera he hoped would support his report later. He yanked Kendrick upward. Kendrick stood up. He was taller than Caldwell by 2 inches. He didn't pull away violently, but he held his ground with the solidity of a granite statue. "I am not resisting," Kendrick said clearly, looking toward the security camera in the corner of the ceiling. "I am complying with your physical force, but I am verbally stating that I do not consent to this search or seizure. I have done nothing wrong." "Turn around, hands behind your back." Caldwell was running on adrenaline and ego now. He spun Kendrick around, shoving him against the window. Kendrick's coffee cup tipped over, spilling dark roast across the table and dripping onto the floor. "You're under arrest for disorderly conduct and failure to identify," Caldwell spat, grabbing his handcuffs. "Failure to identify is not a primary offense in this state unless I'm being lawfully detained for a crime," Kendrick recited. "What crime am I being detained for? Loitering? Trespassing? The owner hasn't asked me to leave." Kendrick said, glancing at Jessica the barista. She was frozen behind the counter, looking terrified. "Miss, have you asked me to leave?" Jessica stammered. No, "Shut up!" Caldwell yelled at the barista. He clicked the first cuff onto Kendrick's left wrist. The cold steel bit into the skin. Kendrick closed his eyes for a second. He was angry, furious actually, but he knew that if he reacted, if he even twitched the wrong way, this man might shoot him. He had seen the files. He knew the statistics. He had to be perfect. "Officer," Kendrick said, his voice low, "in the inside pocket of my jacket, there is a leather wallet. Before you finish putting those cuffs on, I strongly suggest you look at what is inside it." "I don't care what's in your wallet," Caldwell cranked Kendrick's other arm back. "You can show it to the judge." "It's not a driver's license," Kendrick said. "It's my credentials." Caldwell paused. The word credentials hung in the air. "Credentials?" Caldwell scoffed. "What? You a security guard? A PI?" "Check it," Kendrick challenged. Caldwell hesitated. The confidence in Kendrick's voice was unnerving. With one cuff on and the other dangling, Caldwell reached into Kendrick's suit pocket. He felt the leather wallet. He pulled it out. It wasn't a standard bifold. It was a badge wallet. Caldwell flipped it open. The gold badge gleamed under the coffee shop lights. It was heavy, detailed. The eagle at the top. The bold blue letters. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Special Agent Kendrick Hale. Caldwell stared at it. His brain tried to process the information, but it clashed violently with the narrative he had built in his head. "Fake!" his brain screamed. "It has to be fake. You can buy these online." "Nice toy," Caldwell sneered, tossing the badge onto the coffee-soaked table. "Impersonating a federal officer. That's a felony, pal. Now you're really in deep." The crowd gasped. A man in the corner stood up. "Officer, that looks real." "Sit down," Caldwell shouted at the patron. He slammed the second cuff onto Kendrick's wrist. "You think I'm stupid? You think an FBI agent is sitting in a coffee shop in Oak Haven on a Tuesday morning?" Kendrick took a deep breath. "My badge number is 8940. My supervisor is Assistant Director Catherine Hayes. If you run my name through NCIC, it will flag as a protected federal employee. If you put me in that car, you are kidnapping a federal agent." "We'll see about that," Caldwell said, shoving Kendrick toward the door. As they marched out, the patrons had their phones out. They were recording everything. The video of a calm, well-dressed black man being shoved out of a coffee shop by a red-faced screaming cop was already hitting Instagram and TikTok. Outside, Caldwell pushed Kendrick against the hood of the cruiser. The metal was cold. Caldwell began to pat him down, roughly checking for weapons. He found Kendrick's service weapon, a Glock 19M, in his hip holster. "Gun!" Caldwell shouted, jumping back and drawing his own weapon. "He's got a gun!" "I am a federal agent," Kendrick said, his face pressed against the hood. "That is my service weapon. It is registered to the United States government." "Shut your mouth!" Caldwell ripped the gun from Kendrick's holster and placed it on the roof of the car, far out of reach. "You're lucky I didn't drop you right here." Caldwell keyed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4 Alpha. I have one male in custody, uncooperative, armed, possible false credentials, requesting transport. Copy, Unit 4 Alpha." Kendrick looked sideways. He could see down the street. A silver Mercedes-Benz sedan was turning the corner. It was moving fast. It pulled up directly behind the police cruiser, blocking it in. The door flew open. Out stepped a woman in a sharp navy blazer. She had blonde hair tied back in a severe bun and was holding a briefcase. It was District Attorney Vanessa Rhodes. She froze. She saw the police car. She saw the coffee shop patrons watching from the window. And then she saw the man pressed against the hood of the cruiser, handcuffed. Her face went pale. Then it went red with fury. "Officer!" Vanessa screamed, dropping her briefcase on the pavement. "What the hell are you doing?" Caldwell turned around annoyed. "Back off, lady. This is an active crime scene." Vanessa marched up to him. She was 5'4", but she walked with the force of a hurricane. "I am not a lady. I am the district attorney for this county, and the man you have handcuffed is the assistant special agent in charge of the FBI. Caldwell blinked. He looked at Vanessa. He looked at Kendrick. He looked at the badge wallet still sitting on the table inside the shop through the window. He had a fake badge, Caldwell stammered, his confidence beginning to crack. He was loitering. He had a gun. "He is allowed to have a gun," Vanessa yelled right in his face. "He is a federal agent. Uncuff him now." Caldwell swallowed hard. He looked at Kendrick. Kendrick pushed himself off the hood, slowly, turning to face the officer. The look in Kendrick's eyes wasn't anger anymore. It was pity. "It's too late for that, Vanessa," Kendrick said calmly. "Don't unlock them." Caldwell froze, key in hand. "What?" "I said don't unlock them," Kendrick repeated. "You've already detained me. You've arrested me. You've seized my weapon. You've declared I am impersonating an officer. We are going to the station, Officer Caldwell. We are going to process this arrest because I want every single second of this on official record." "Sir, Caldwell's hands were shaking. "If you really are who she says—" "There is no if," Kendrick cut him off. "You wanted to be a big man. You wanted to make an arrest. Let's go. Read me my rights." Caldwell stood there paralyzed. The reality of what he had done was crashing down on him. He had just assaulted and arrested a man who could likely have the National Guard called on this town if he wanted. "Read me my rights," Kendrick commanded. Just then, 3 more vehicles screeched onto the scene. These weren't Oak Haven police cars. They were black Chevy Tahoes with tinted windows and government plates. Doors flew open. 6 men and women in tactical gear spilled out, jackets emblazoned with FBI. They didn't draw their weapons on the cop, but their presence was overwhelming. They surrounded the scene. One of them, a senior agent named Tom, walked up to Caldwell. "Officer," Tom said, his voice like grinding gravel, "I believe you have my boss in handcuffs. I'm going to need you to step away from him slowly." Caldwell stepped back, his hands raised in surrender. Kendrick looked at Vanessa Rhodes. "Vanessa, call Derek Vaughn. Call the media. I want everyone to see this." The cameras were rolling. The nightmare for Oak Haven was just beginning. The ride to the Oak Haven police station was less of a transport and more of a funeral procession for Officer Bryce Caldwell's career. Caldwell drove in silence. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. His eyes kept darting to the rearview mirror, not to look at his prisoner, but to look at the convoy behind him. 3 black Chevy Tahoes followed closely, their grille lights flashing silently. They weren't aggressive, but they were relentless. Every turn Caldwell made, they made. Every time he braked, they braked. It was a predator pack stalking wounded prey. In the back seat, Special Agent Kendrick Hale sat comfortably despite the handcuffs. He had shifted his position so he could look out the window. He wasn't thinking about the pain in his wrists. He was thinking about Title 18, Section 242 of the U.S. Code, deprivation of rights under color of law. "You're quiet back there," Caldwell said, his voice cracking. He was fishing. He wanted Kendrick to scream, to threaten him, to give him something, anything he could use to justify what he had done. If he threatens me, Caldwell thought, I can add a charge. Terroristic threats. Something. Kendrick didn't answer. He just watched the manicured lawns of Oak Haven roll by. "I said you're quiet," Caldwell snapped, his bravado thinning like cheap paint. "You know, if you just apologize for resisting, maybe I can talk to the chief. We can work this out. A citation. You walk away." Kendrick finally turned his head. He looked through the plexiglass divider, locking eyes with Caldwell in the mirror. "Officer Caldwell," Kendrick said, his voice terrifyingly devoid of emotion, "you are under the impression that this is a negotiation. It is not. You have already committed the act. The timeline is set. Anything you say to me now is just evidence I will use at your sentencing hearing." Caldwell slammed his hand on the steering wheel. "You think you're untouchable because you have a badge. This is my town. The chief will back me. The union will back me." "Drive the car," Kendrick said. They pulled into the station lot. Usually this was a safe space for Caldwell, the Blue Castle, but today it looked like a trap. As Caldwell parked the cruiser in the Sally Port, the Tahoes swarmed the entrance, blocking the exit. Caldwell got out and opened the back door. He grabbed Kendrick's arm to pull him out, but his grip was looser now, uncertain. "Walk," Caldwell muttered. They entered the booking area. The desk sergeant, an older man named Frank, looked up from his computer. He had a half-eaten donut in one hand. "Hey, Bryce, what you got? Another stray?" Frank joked, not looking up fully. "Process him," Caldwell said, pushing Kendrick toward the counter. "Disorderly conduct, resisting arrest, impersonating an officer." Frank looked up. He saw the expensive suit. He saw the calm demeanor, and then he saw the face. Frank froze. Bryce, just book him?" Caldwell was sweating profusely now. "Bryce," Frank whispered, standing up slowly. "Look at the monitors." Caldwell looked up at the wall of security screens. The lobby camera showed a scene of absolute chaos. The front doors had been thrown open. 6 FBI agents in tactical vests were securing the perimeter. District Attorney Vanessa Rhodes was standing at the front desks, screaming at the receptionist so loud the audio was clipping on the monitor. And behind her, a news van was already pulling up. "Who is this guy?" Frank asked, his face pale. Kendrick leaned forward against the counter, the handcuffs clinking on the laminate. "My name is Special Agent Kendrick Hale, and I'd like to speak to your chief now." Just then, the heavy steel door separating the booking area from the offices flew open. Chief Warren Hayes stormed in. Hayes was a man who spent more time at country club dinners than crime scenes. He had silver hair, a tan that was too orange for autumn, and a temper that was legendary. He was holding a phone to his ear, listening to someone screaming on the other end. He hung up and looked at Caldwell. Then he looked at Kendrick. "Take those cuffs off him," Hayes said. His voice was a low growl. "Chief, he resisted," Caldwell started, desperate. "He had a fake badge. I said take them off," Hayes roared, the sound echoing off the concrete walls. "Do you have any idea who is on the phone? The Attorney General of Illinois. The governor's office is on hold on line 2. Caldwell fumbled for his keys. His hands were shaking so badly he dropped them. They clattered on the floor, sliding toward Kendrick's feet. Kendrick didn't move. He looked down at the keys, then up at Caldwell. "Pick them up," Kendrick said. Caldwell bent down, humiliated, snatching the keys. He unlocked the cuffs. Kendrick rubbed his wrists. He checked his watch. He adjusted his suit jacket. Then he looked at the chief. "Chief Hayes," Kendrick said calmly, "I'm keeping these cuffs as evidence. Bag them." "Agent Hale," Hayes said, putting on his best political smile, walking over with an extended hand. "I am so terribly sorry. Clearly there has been a massive communication breakdown. Officer Caldwell here is overzealous. We can fix this. Come to my office. Let's have some coffee. Real coffee, not the swill from the break room." Kendrick looked at the chief's hand. He didn't shake it. "I don't want coffee, Chief. I want to file a formal complaint, and then I want to sit in your interrogation room." "My interrogation room?" Hayes blinked. "Sir, you're free to go. We're dropping everything, obviously." "No," Kendrick said. "I was arrested. I was brought here. I want the full experience because if we stop now, your lawyers will argue later that it was a brief detention. You booked me. Now, I want you to interview me on the record with the cameras rolling." Hayes looked at Caldwell, his eyes promising murder. "Caldwell, my office. Now." "No," Kendrick interjected. "Caldwell stays. He's the arresting officer. He needs to write his report. If he leaves, he has time to get his story straight with his union rep. He writes it now in the squad room. Alone." Hayes realized he had lost control of his own station. The FBI agents were now visible through the glass of the booking room door, watching like sentinels. "Fine," Hayes hissed. "Caldwell, go to the squad room. Start typing. If you leave out a single comma, I will fire you myself." Caldwell shuffled away, a dead man walking. Kendrick turned to the chief. "After you, Chief." The interrogation room at Oak Haven PD was standard. Cinderblock walls painted a depressing shade of beige, a metal table bolted to the floor, a two-way mirror that everyone knew was there. Kendrick sat in the suspect chair. Chief Hayes sat across from him. The district attorney, Vanessa Rhodes, stood in the corner, arms crossed, watching like a hawk. "Agent Hale," Hayes started, folding his hands on the table. "Look, I've known Bryce Caldwell for 10 years. He's old school. He makes mistakes, but he's a family man. He has 2 kids. I have 3, Kendrick said flatly. And my eldest son is 17. He drives a Honda Civic. He drives through towns like this to get to soccer practice. If Officer Caldwell had pulled him over instead of me, would my son be sitting here, or would he be in the morgue? The room went silent. That's speculative, Hayes said, tugging at his collar. We're not here to discuss what-ifs. We are here to discuss pattern and practice, Kendrick corrected him. You see, Chief, while I was sitting in the back of that cruiser, I made a call. My team in Chicago pulled the stats for Oak Haven PD. Kendrick pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket, the briefing he had been reading on his phone before the arrest. On the back, he had scribbled notes during the ride-over. Officer Caldwell has 14 excessive force complaints in 5 years. 12 of them involve minorities. 0 were sustained by your Internal Affairs Division. You signed off on every single exoneration, Chief. Hayes' face hardened. Internal Affairs is an independent body. Internal Affairs is Sergeant Miller, who I believe is Caldwell's brother-in-law. Is that correct? Hayes went pale. How do you... I'm the FBI, Chief. We know everything. But here is the problem for you. This isn't just about a racist cop anymore. It's about a corrupt department, and you are the head of the snake. Vanessa Rhodes stepped forward. Chief, I'm advising you right now. I will not be prosecuting Agent Hale, obviously, but I will be opening an investigation into your department's use of force, effective immediately. You can't do that, Vanessa, Hayes pleaded. We're on the same team. Not anymore, Vanessa said coldly. You embarrass me. You embarrassed the county, and you violated the civil rights of a federal agent. I'm not going down with your ship. At that moment, the door opened. A young officer stuck his head in. Chief, there's a problem in the lobby. What now? Hayes snapped. It's the press. They're everywhere. And there's a lawyer here, Attorney Derek Vaughn. Hayes put his head in his hands. Derek Vaughn was the most feared civil rights attorney in the Midwest. He sued cities for sport. If he was here, it meant the lawsuit had already been drafted. Kendrick stood up. That's my counsel. I called him from the coffee shop. Kendrick walked to the two-way mirror. He leaned in close, staring at his own reflection, knowing that behind the glass someone was watching. This interview is over, Kendrick said. Chief, I suggest you preserve all body camera footage, all dash cam footage, and the security logs from the coffee shop. If a single second of footage goes missing due to a technical glitch or a server error, I will personally charge you with obstruction of justice. Do we understand each other? Hayes nodded, defeated. We understand. Kendrick walked out of the interrogation room. As he entered the lobby, the flashbulbs were blinding. Dozens of reporters were crammed into the small space. Attorney Derek Vaughn, a tall man in an immaculate pinstripe suit, was already giving a statement. A flagrant abuse of power, Vaughn boomed to the cameras. Officer Caldwell saw a black man in a coffee shop and decided that his mere existence was a crime. This city will pay for that mistake. Kendrick didn't stop to talk to the press. He didn't have to. The image of him walking out of the police station, flanked by FBI agents, adjusting his cuffs, said more than any soundbite could. He walked to his SUV, which had been driven over by one of his agents. Vanessa Rhodes followed him out. Kendrick, wait, he turned. Vanessa, I'm sorry our meeting got derailed. Screw the meeting, she said. Are you okay? I'm fine, Kendrick said. But they aren't. Vanessa, I want Caldwell's badge, and I want it by the end of the week. You'll have it, she promised. But Kendrick, the lawsuit, Vaughn is talking millions. Kendrick looked back at the station. He saw Caldwell watching from a second-story window, a silhouette of regret. It's not about the money, Vanessa, Kendrick said. It's about the cost. They need to learn that freedom isn't free, but oppression is going to be very, very expensive. Kendrick got into his SUV. Let's go, he told his driver. As they pulled away, Kendrick pulled out his phone. He had a new email. It was the security footage from the Bean and Leaf. The owner, terrified of being implicated, had sent it directly to the FBI tip line minutes ago. Kendrick watched the video. It was perfect, high definition, audio included. It showed Kendrick sitting calmly. It showed Caldwell aggressive, rude, and unprovoked. He forwarded the video to Derek Vaughn with a simple subject line, "The smoking gun." The first domino had fallen. Now the rest would come crashing down. Back inside the station, Chief Hayes was in crisis mode. He marched into the squad room where Caldwell was sitting, staring at a blank Word document. "Are you an idiot?" Hayes hissed. "You total, complete idiot." "Chief, I can fix this," Caldwell said, standing up. "I looked up the law. If I can prove I had reasonable suspicion based on a 911 call, we're good. Qualified immunity." "There was no 911 call, Bryce." "We can make one," Caldwell whispered, his eyes desperate, manic. "I have a burner phone. We call it in now, retroactive. Say the timestamp was off. We say someone called in a man with a gun. That gives me probable cause to search him. If I have probable cause, the lawsuit goes away." Hayes stared at him. It was illegal. It was a felony. It was insane. But Hayes was thinking about his pension. He was thinking about the election next year. He was thinking about the $5.6 million hole this was about to blow in the city budget. Hayes walked over to the door, closed it, and locked it. He turned off his body camera. "How do we do it?" Hayes asked. They were about to dig their hole so deep they would never climb out. Because what they didn't know was that Kendrick's watch, a seemingly analog Omega, was actually a piece of bureau tech. It had been recording audio the entire time, and it was still recording in the evidence bag sitting on the chief's desk just outside the thin glass wall. The squad room of the Oak Haven Police Department felt like a pressure cooker. The blinds were drawn. The door was locked. Chief Hayes sat at his desk, his face bathed in the pale blue light of his computer monitor. Officer Bryce Caldwell stood behind him, pacing nervously, biting his fingernails until they bled. "Are you sure this is going to work?" Caldwell whispered. "If the feds find out we tampered with the server—" "Shut up," Hayes snapped, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "The feds aren't looking at our local dispatch server. They're looking at you. And if we give them a reason for your stop, the heat dies down. We just need probable cause." Hayes navigated to the computer-aided dispatch CAD system. He had administrative privileges, the God mode of the police department. He could view, edit, and delete logs. It was a feature designed for correcting typos, not rewriting history. "Okay," Hayes muttered. "The time of the incident was around 8:20, so we need a call at 8:12. He opened a new entry. Call type: suspicious person, man with a gun. Location: the Bean and Leaf, 114 Main Street. Caller: anonymous. Notes: male, black, wearing a suit, gun in his waistband. Fear for safety." Hayes hit enter. The log slotted itself into the timeline, looking indistinguishable from the real calls surrounding it. "There," Hayes exhaled, leaning back. 8:12. Dispatch received a call reporting an armed subject matching the suspect's description. That's why you entered. That's why you were aggressive. You thought you were engaging an active shooter. Caldwell looked at the screen. A wave of relief washed over him. "It looks real." "It is real now," Hayes said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "This is the official record. When that lawyer Derek Vaughn subpoenas the logs, this is what he gets. He sees this. He knows he can't win a civil rights case. He settles for a few grand to go away." They shared a look. Two men bound by a secret that could send them both to prison for 20 years. "Now," Hayes said, standing up, "go wash your face. You look guilty. I'm going to release Hale. We give him his property back. We apologize, and we get him the hell out of here." Hayes unlocked the door. He walked out to the desk sergeant's counter. A clear plastic evidence bag sat there. Inside was Kendrick's Omega watch, his badge wallet, and his phone. Hayes picked up the bag. He didn't notice the small rhythmic pulse of a tiny red pixel on the face of the watch dial. He didn't know that the Omega was a modified piece of surveillance tech issued to high-ranking bureau agents for undercover work. It had a battery life of 48 hours and a microphone sensitive enough to hear a pin drop in the next room, and it had been sitting 3 feet away from the squad room door the entire time. Hayes walked into the lobby, forcing a smile. Kendrick was standing there, his attorney Derek Vaughn beside him. "Agent Hale," Hayes said, handing over the bag. "Here are your personal effects. Again, I want to extend the department's sincerest apologies. Officer Caldwell acted on incomplete information. Kendrick took the bag. He didn't smile. He opened it slowly, taking out his watch. He strapped it onto his wrist. He tapped the glass face once. The screen flickered. A tiny icon appeared. Recording saved. Kendrick's eyes narrowed slightly. He looked at the chief. He looked at the squad room door. He did the math. Incomplete information, Kendrick repeated slowly. Is that what we're calling it? We're conducting a full internal review, Hayes lied smoothly. But we believe there was a dispatch error regarding a call for service. A call for service, Derek Vaughn repeated, his lawyer instincts flaring up. My client was buying a scone. There was no call. We'll see what the logs say, Hayes said, his confidence returning. Have a good day, gentlemen. Kendrick and Vaughn walked out of the station. The autumn sun was setting, casting long, dark shadows over the parking lot. Once they were in the safety of Vaughn's black sedan, Kendrick turned to his lawyer. Derek, Kendrick said quietly, don't settle. I wasn't planning to, Vaughn said, but if they produce a 911 log, it complicates things. It gives them cover. Kendrick held up his wrist. He tapped the watch face, bringing up the audio file waveform. They fabricated it, Kendrick said. I have them. You have what? I have the chief and Caldwell conspiring to fake the log, Kendrick said. It's all on here, crystal clear. Vaughn looked at the watch, then at Kendrick. A slow, shark-like grin spread across the lawyer's face. Kendrick, Vaughn said, do not give this to them yet. Do not give this to the press. Why not? Because, Vaughn said, starting the engine, if we release it now, they resign. They get a slap on the wrist, maybe probation. Vaughn pulled out of the parking lot, glancing back at the police station. We wait for the deposition, Vaughn explained. We put them under oath. We let them lie on the official record. We let them commit perjury, and then we drop the hammer. That's how we get the $5.6 million. And that's how we make sure they never wear a badge again. The law offices of Vaughn and Associates in Chicago had a conference room all glass and mahogany overlooking the Chicago skyline. It was a setting designed to intimidate. On one side of the massive table sat Officer Bryce Caldwell and Chief Warren Hayes. Next to them was the city attorney, a nervous man named Peter Lewis, who smelled faintly of antacids. On the other side sat Kendrick Hale and Derek Vaughn. A court reporter sat at the head of the table, her fingers poised over her stenotype machine. A video camera was set up on a tripod, the red light blinking. This is the deposition of Officer Bryce Caldwell, Vaughn announced for the record. Case number 2, 4-CV-890, Hale versus City of Oak Haven. Vaughn started slowly. He asked about Caldwell's training, his background, his history of disciplinary actions. Caldwell answered with rehearsed arrogance. He felt safe. The fake CAD log had been submitted into discovery 2 days ago. As far as Caldwell knew, the evidence supported him. Officer Caldwell, Vaughn said, leaning forward. Let's talk about the morning in question. Why did you enter the Bean and Leaf? I was responding to a dispatch call, Caldwell said confidently. Report of a man with a gun. I see. Vaughn sent shuffling some papers. And you received this call. How? Over the radio. It came up on my computer terminal, Caldwell lied. Dispatch sent it through. And the description? Male, black, wearing a suit, gun in his waistband? Kendrick Hale sat perfectly still. He was watching Caldwell's eyes. He saw the microscopic twitch in the corner of the officer's eye. The tell. And you are absolutely certain this call existed before you entered the shop? Vaughn pressed. You didn't decide to harass Mr. Hale and then look for a justification later? Absolutely not, Caldwell scoffed. That would be illegal. I followed protocol. Chief Hayes? Vaughn turned his attention to the chief. You oversaw the retrieval of these logs. Can you verify their authenticity? Hayes adjusted his tie. Yes, I pulled the logs myself. The call came in at 8:12. 8:12, Vaughn repeated. Interesting. Vaughn reached into his briefcase. The room went silent. The city attorney, Peter Lewis, stopped clicking his pen. He sensed a shift in the air. "I have here," Vaughn said, pulling out a USB drive, a forensic digital analysis of the Oak Haven PD server, but more importantly, I have a recording. "Objection," Lewis stammered. "Recording? What recording?" "My client," Vaughn gestured to Kendrick, "is a high-level federal agent. He wears a device that records audio in high fidelity for evidence gathering in the field. On the day of his arrest, his property was seized. It was placed in an evidence bag on the desk sergeant's counter." Hayes's face drained of blood. He remembered where he had stood. He remembered the door he had left unlocked. "This recording," Vaughn continued, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper, "captured a conversation between Chief Hayes and Officer Caldwell at approximately 4:30 that same day." Vaughn plugged the USB into his laptop. He turned the volume up. The voice of Chief Hayes filled the room, clear and undeniable. "We just need probable cause. The time of the incident was 8:20, so we need a call at 8:12. Then Caldwell's voice. "It looks real." And Hayes again. "It is real now. When that lawyer Derek Vaughn subpoenas the logs, this is what he gets." Silence. Absolute suffocating silence. Caldwell looked like he was going to vomit. Hayes was staring at the table, his mouth slightly open, his career evaporating in real time. The city attorney, Peter Lewis, closed his folder. He pushed his chair back. I need a recess. I need to call the mayor." "No," Kendrick Hale spoke for the first time. He stood up. Kendrick walked around the table. He didn't look like a victim. He looked like the assistant special agent in charge. "There will be no recess," Kendrick said, "because this is no longer a civil deposition." The door to the conference room opened. 4 FBI agents walked in. They weren't wearing tactical gear this time. They were in suits, but the handcuffs on their belts were very real. "Wallace Hayes, Bryce Caldwell," one of the agents said. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to deprive civil rights, obstruction of justice, and perjury." Caldwell stood up, panic in his eyes. "You can't arrest us here. We have immunity." "Qualified immunity protects you from civil lawsuits for mistakes," Kendrick said, leaning in close to Caldwell's face. "It does not protect you from federal prison for felonies." The agents cuffed Caldwell. Then they cuffed the chief. The camera was still rolling. The court reporter was still typing, capturing every word of their downfall. "Mr. Lewis," Vaughn said to the terrified city attorney, "the settlement offer just went up. We are now asking for $5.6 million, and we want a federal consent decree over the Oak Haven Police Department. If you say no, we release this audio to the nightly news in 1 hour." Peter Lewis looked at the handcuffed chief, then at the furious FBI agent. I'll draft the check," Lewis whispered. Kendrick watched as Caldwell and Hayes were marched out of the law firm, past a lobby full of stunned secretaries and clients. "Hard karma," Vaughn murmured, watching them go. "Not karma," Kendrick corrected him, buttoning his jacket. "Justice. Karma is luck. Justice is work." The United States District Court for the Northern District of Illinois was packed. Every seat was taken by reporters, civil rights activists, and the stunned citizens of Oak Haven, who had watched their city's reputation crumble on national television. Bryce Caldwell and Warren Hayes stood before Judge Anthony Russo. They weren't wearing uniforms or suits anymore. They were wearing orange jumpsuits. The transformation was startling. Caldwell, once bulky and arrogant, looked deflated, having lost weight in pretrial confinement. Hayes looked like a ghost, his hands trembling as he gripped the defense table. Judge Russo, a man known for his harsh sentencing in corruption cases, adjusted his glasses and looked down at the two men. "In my years on the bench," Judge Russo began, his voice echoing in the silent room, "I have seen criminals who rob because they are hungry. I have seen men who kill because they are angry. But what stands before me today is something far worse. You two men robbed this community of its trust. And you tried to kill the very concept of justice simply because your egos could not handle a black man with authority." Caldwell looked down at his shackles. "Bow down, Bryce Caldwell," the judge continued. "For the deprivation of rights under color of law and for the falsification of federal records, I sentence you to years in federal prison. There will be no possibility of parole." Caldwell's wife, sitting in the back row, let out a sob. Caldwell closed his eyes. He would miss his children growing up. He would miss his daughter's graduation. He would miss everything. "Warren Hayes." The judge turned to the former chief. "You were the captain of the ship. You were supposed to stop this. Instead, you steered it into the rocks to save your own skin. For conspiracy and obstruction of justice, I sentence you to years." As the marshals moved in to take them away, Kendrick Hale stood up in the front row. Caldwell paused as he was being led out. He looked at Kendrick. There was no anger left in Caldwell's eyes, only a deep, hollow regret. He opened his mouth to say something. Perhaps, "I'm sorry." But the marshal shoved him forward. "Move it, inmate," the marshal said. The word inmate hit the room like a hammer. The transition was complete. The predator had become the prisoner. But the punishment didn't end with prison. The following week, the City Council of Oak Haven held an emergency meeting. The town hall was overflowing. The citizens were furious, not at Kendrick Hale, but at the police department. The settlement had been finalized, $5.6 million. Because the police department's insurance policy had a willful misconduct exclusion clause, the insurance company refused to pay. The fraudulent dispatch logs and the conspiracy proved that this wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate crime. That meant the $5.6 million had to come directly from the city's general fund. The mayor, sweating under the glare of the lights, announced the cuts. "To pay this judgment," the mayor stammered, "we will be forced to cancel the new high school football stadium renovation. We are also reducing the library's hours by 50%, and we are raising property taxes by 4.5% for the next 3 years." The room erupted. The wealthy residents of Oak Haven, who had blindly supported the police for years, were finally feeling the cost of that support. They realized too late that corruption isn't just a moral failing, it's a financial liability. The blue wall of silence had just cost them their football stadium. Kendrick Hale watched the town hall meeting on the news from his office in Chicago. He turned the TV off. "You got everything you wanted," Vanessa Rhodes said. She had resigned as DA and was now working in private practice, having been unable to stomach the corruption she had uncovered. "They're in prison. The city is paying. You won." "Not yet," Kendrick said. "There's one last thing." Kendrick picked up the check for $5.6 million. It was sitting on his desk. It was life-changing money. He could retire. He could buy a house in the Caribbean. He could disappear. But Kendrick Hale was an FBI agent. He didn't do this for the payout. "I'm not keeping it," Kendrick said. Vanessa looked at him, stunned. "Kendrick? Are you crazy?" "I don't want their money," Kendrick said, standing up and walking to the window. "I want their legacy." Kendrick picked up a file. "I've already filed the paperwork. I'm using the entire $5.6 million to start a non-profit organization based right there in Oak Haven." "What kind of organization?" Kendrick smiled. It was the first time he had truly smiled since the coffee shop incident. "It's a legal defense fund. It will provide free, high-end legal representation for anyone in the county who is wrongfully stopped, searched, or detained by the police. We're going to hire the best civil rights lawyers in the state. We're going to audit every arrest. We're going to sue them every single time they step out of line." Vanessa's jaw dropped. "Kendrick, you're going to use their own money to police the police forever. And the best part?" Kendrick handed her the brochure for the new foundation. Vanessa read the name on the front. She gasped, then burst out laughing. "The Caldwell and Hayes Center for Civil Rights. You named it after them." "I want their names to be remembered," Kendrick said, his eyes hard. "I want every cop in that station to drive past that building every day. I want them to see the names Caldwell and Hayes in big, bold letters. I want them to remember that if they abuse their power, they won't just go to prison. They will unknowingly fund the very people they tried to oppress." Kendrick Hale put on his sunglasses. "Come on, Vanessa, let's go get some coffee. I know a place." And that is how a simple morning coffee run took down an entire corrupt administration. Officer Bryce Caldwell thought he was detaining a suspect. Instead, he detained the architect of his own destruction. This story serves as a brutal reminder. Authority is not a license to bully in the digital age where cameras are everywhere and the truth is just a subpoena away. The old ways of policing are dying. Caldwell and Hayes learned the hard way that when you strip away a man's rights, you better be ready to pay the price. For the citizens of Oak Haven, the $5.6 million tax hike is a daily reminder that silence in the face of injustice is never free. And for Kendrick Hale, he proved that the most dangerous weapon a man can carry isn't a gun, it's the truth. If this story got your blood boiling, or if you cheered when Kendrick revealed that recording, hit that like button right now. It helps us get these stories out to more people. What do you think about Kendrick's final move? Was naming the legal center after the corrupt cops the ultimate revenge? Or should he have kept the millions for himself? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you want more stories of hard karma and justice served cold, make sure you subscribe and ring the notification bell. You don't want to miss what we have coming next. Stay safe, know your rights, and I'll see you in the next one.